So when explaining how 3D chess works, I'm gonna have to use the handheld camera, which I just don't have a tripod that could possibly do this. So my voice might get louder and quieter, and it'll be a bit shaky. I'm sorry about that, but it's what I have to do. So the reason 3D chess isn't as hard as some people might think is because they would have never seen a 3D chessboard from the top. I can't see the camera, so I don't know how good that angle is. It's a row of 10 total from there to there, and 8 from just on the main boards, by 4 on the main or 6 on the attack boards. I'll say as well, these ones are a bit wobbly. That's just because of the print. That's not a flaw of the design. This piece was a bit bad when it came out. This would be moving file, rank would be going this way, and diagonal is of course moving diagonally. Now this will make a bit more sense later, but non-existent tiles in terms of moving do exist because these can move. So for example, there are 4 tiles above here that aren't actually in play yet. That'll make sense later. And I'll link to a big, not too big, but the webpage where I got all these rules from if you want to read it over there. So one of the things that makes this easy for people who know how to play chess is any move legal in 2D chess is also legal in 3D chess. There's just a few differences with movement, obviously. Now the pieces start out differently than conventional chess. I'm going to focus down here on the white side who gets the lower layer and still starts the game. The way you'll count the pieces is this from left to right would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's how you get your 1 through 8 isn't in this line. So pawns start off the front of the back squares as in normal chess. And I'll point out as well, they should match up, as in this is a white square, and below it is a white square, this is black, below it is black. Sorry, it's hard to place the pieces on the chessboard while holding the camera, but the order goes rook, queen on the left if you're the white player, knight, bishop, bishop, knight, king, rook. Now, it's the exact same piece layout for the black player, except that king is on the left and queen is on the right. So the board is divided into queen side and king side, and an easy way to remember this is the queen, that one, is on her own color, both sides. Now when I said that any move that can be made in 2D chess can be made in 3D chess, this is what I meant. So the rook, the only legal move he can make would be to go right there, but he could also make that same move and end up right here, which is the space directly above here. So all pieces can move normally, but they can choose to end on any space they want vertically. I just realized I've been calling this a rook. This is a knight. This knight cannot move to this space now because your own pawn is on it, but the rook can move to this space above that one, and that is a legal move. You can see it's still got the L shape, it just ends right there on the higher layer. The same rule applies if that would be a black pawn instead of a white one as well. Now this next move can be a bit tricky to wrap your mind around, especially if you're just reading it, but this bishop you can see is diagonal from the knight, but he can't just move and attack the knight because this pawn in all pieces block movement on every level above and below them. In this case, there isn't a level below. But what this bishop can do is move, and then once he's above the space that the piece is blocking, and it would be the same if this was a black piece, he has to stop his move, and then he can continue it the next turn and take that knight. Another example, this rook wants to take this knight. He would move down to this square, which is forward, until he is below this pawn, which blocks movement. The black player would take a turn, and then he could move forward onto this square and take that piece, as opposed to moving forward, moving across, under the piece, and then attacking. He is stopped because this piece is above this square, meaning it blocks movement there. And if this was the case where you had a piece there, this piece is blocking movement here and here. And again, when I say blocking movement, I just mean that you have to stop above that piece, but like you have to end your move above or below that piece if you're moving across it. And this is a good point to point out. The non-existent squares thing, I'm not sure how much it would come up in an actual game, but these 4 squares used to be above here, 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 and here. So these 4 spaces up here exist for movement, but you can't end your turn on them because they're obviously not there. I don't know when you could ever use that, because you have to stop a move above or below a piece that would already be there, but that's just a rule to be aware of. Now, the rule where this pawn could still move forward 2 spaces on its first move is true, with the exception that after this attack board is moved, that's what the little 2x2s are called, attack boards. After this is moved, the pawn can no longer move 2 spaces on its first move. Even if the pawn itself has never moved, the fact that the board has moved mean that the pawn cannot move 2 spaces on its first move. Now, the rule where if a pawn reaches the furthest rank, which remember is just movement this way, it upgrades to the same as in 2D chess. That furthest square is dictated by where the pawn starts. So a pawn starting right here, its furthest square is one of these 4. A pawn starting here, its furthest square is one of these 4. And a pawn starting right there, which is the same as here, just under it, is also these squares. So basically, the 4 pawns that start here and here, and on the spaces I've moved here and here, they have to get to one of these far ends, and pawns on the main board have to get to a far end on the main board. And the same rule applies for blacks, it's just going down as opposed to going up. Now, casting, which is the rule where the king and the rook swap places in 2D chess, is a little bit different in 3D chess just because they're so close. So the 2D rules apply where casting is illegal after the rook has moved or the king has moved. But in 3D chess, it's also illegal if it is your very first move of the game. I don't know if that's a 2D rule, rule in 2D chess. I've never heard of it, but you can't do it as your first move. And for those of you who have never seen it, casting is literally just that. The rook and the king switch places. So now, the main difference is attack boards. Attack boards can move if it either has one piece or no pieces. Now, if the attack board has one piece, its movement is controlled, in this case, by the white player, and this attack board, for example, would be controlled by the black player. Now, an attack board with no pieces on it is controlled by the original player that owned it. So these 2 boards are owned by the white player, and these 2 boards are owned by the black player because it starts on their side. You might want to put a mark, like maybe a W on each of the white ones, or if you're 3D printing it, just print these 2 pieces in white. Actually, that's a great idea. Print those in white instead of black. Attack boards can move similar to rooks. I'm actually going to use this one because there's not a piece on it. So attack boards move just like rooks, except based on these pins and not squares. So this attack board can move forward up to that layer, forward on the same layer, across onto this layer, and an empty attack board can also move backwards onto this layer, but not backwards in diagonal, forwards in diagonal, and it can't skip up 2 layers. It can only move 1 peg at a time, and only the empty attack boards can move backwards. And those are all the differences between 3D chess and 2D chess. Again, I've got a link to the tournament rules in the description. There are some more tournament rules I didn't go over, but this is just like if you're playing with a friend or something. And now you know how to play 3D chess